Once there was an explorer who longed to see distant lands, and so she gathered up a caravan of people and headed out. They traveled for months through harsh terrains that were uninhabitable, eventually ending up in a large mountain range where it seemed like every mountain they went over, another one they found, some of them covered with trees, some of them with streams. But as time went on, it got harder and harder. They came into a space of these mountains where there were lots of trees, but there were not frequent streams to be found, so they could go days sometimes without water. As they traveled, they found themselves having accidents, and people were injured, and some even died. They were to the point where most of the remaining group felt like they were doomed when she led them over one last pass as their food was running out, and below them was a great green, lush valley. It was amazingly, stunningly beautiful. There were streams weaving through it. They descended down into that land, and she listened to the land and quickly learned which fruits were edible on the plants and which ones were not. They learned which plants were healing and which ones were just weeds. As they went along, they learned that the beasts of that land, some of them were wild and to be avoided, and some of them could be hunted for food. They learned about the streams and the fish in those streams, which ones tasted good and which ones should be avoided, and they began to settle in that place. This land had saved their lives, and this explorer became their queen, and she created a community among them. Eventually, she built a simple castle, not for herself, but as a gathering place for the people to come together as community. It was the place where she would judge disputes among them. Around that simple castle grew up simple little villages where the people would live. They began to harvest and farm their own crops, as well as to have pastures for livestock. All the while, though, they maintained this relationship with this wild and beautiful land that surrounded them. There would be years where the crops were lean and the livestock did not do well, but the land was always there with its fruit and its streams and its animals to help keep them nourished and provided for. She was a good and a gracious queen, and she made sure that no one went without, that everyone was provided for, and that they all lived together, and the land was content. But there came a time where a message came over the mountains that this queen needed to leave her queendom and head back to where she had come from for a time. And so she gathered up a small group of travelers and she left. But before she left, she pulled aside her most trusted aide and said, "You will govern in my absence, and I need you to remember 3 things. First, work hard to serve these people and care for these people. All of you should work hard because this land is a wild and difficult place to live. Work hard together, work hard to serve and care for one another, but on the 7th day, do not work. On that day, rest together, be in community together, reflect on the blessings of this land and this community that I have created for you. Number 2, she said, listen to the land. Listen to this land that has cared for us. If you care for the land and be good stewards of this land, it will care for you. We have served this land and coexisted with this land, and it has gone well for us because of that. And number 3, she said, you have to take care of yourself. And I don't mean in selfish ways, but you have to be whole and healthy if you're going to serve other people and care for other people. So make sure you tend to your own well-being. With that, she left her aide in charge and she headed back over the mountain. Now, this first governor did an outstanding job. He had spent lots and lots of time with this queen, and he knew what she meant by each of those 3 instructions. He was an able judge of disputes. He managed the community well, but there was one thing he wasn't so good at, and that was listening to the land. He could hear the breeze blowing through the leaves of the trees. He could hear the fish jumping in the waters. He could hear all of it, but he didn't know how to listen. He didn't know what any of it meant. He lived a good long life, and as he was getting towards the end, he was still had plenty of years, they thought, ahead of him, but he caught a sickness, and it turned bad quickly. And as he only probably had hours left, he thought he should gather his aid and pass on the wisdom. But he was short of breath in those final hours, and so he gathered that aide next to him, and he said, first, work hard, but not on the 7th day. Second, serve the land, listen to the land as best you can. Third, take care of yourself. And with that, he breathed his last breath. Now, the spirit of those bits of wisdom that the queen had left him was there, but all of the details weren't quite there. And this young aide of his had not been around the queen when he was coming up as much, so he didn't get fully what this governor was passing on to him. So as he became the governor, he did okay for a while. But then things started to change. People would bring him gifts. The people that worked in the vineyards would bring him wine, and people that managed the livestock would bring him a hog or something. He had not seen the queen and the previous governor handle those things with such humility and grace and turn them into gifts for the whole community. So he accepted them. And then he began to expect them. And then he began at some point to demand them, because it felt like it was part of his right as the governor of this place to be treated differently. Over time, he started to add little bits of extravagance to this castle that he began to claim it as his own, and the people around him started to do similar things. There came a year where there was a very long, harsh winter that cut into the time when they would have planted in the spring, and so by the time they got to the fall, the crop wasn't so great. Now this turned out to be all right, because they had always coexisted with the land, and the land again saved them and provided for them as their own crops failed them. But the governor panicked. He didn't like that too much, because it seemed like things were starting to fall apart, and so he ordered that this whole swath of forest at the edge of the villages away from the mountain be cut down and turned into farm fields. And so as they cut down all of these trees, you could hear them groan as they tipped over. And they didn't think ahead that they might use these trees for something, so they just piled them up in a great big bonfire. And that bonfire groaned, and it almost sounded like the weeping of the trees as those flames went up and the smoke went up. He would go back to the castle in the evening, and he could hear this groan in the air. And it was the wind, but it sounded different than the wind. But he ignored it and just thought, the wind sounds different these days. And so they turned that into farm fields, and they turned more into pastures, and they began to make more crops and have more animals, and they began to grow as a community. Soon they needed more lumber to build bigger houses, and so they went up the mountainside and took all of the trees from there and used them for what they could of lumber and for firewood and fuel and all of the rest of it. When it came time for him to pass on the wisdom, and as it went from generation to generation through these governors, it got further diluted to where one governor finally heard the wisdom, and it came to him and it said, work hard. No longer did they rest on the seventh day because there was so much work to do. The second bit had become not serve the land and listen to it, but was just use the land. And the third bit was take care of yourself. So the governors began to act that way, where they worked hard all the time and they utilized the land and just took everything they could from it. And they stopped paying attention to other people and began to just serve themselves, and the people followed suit. And there were consequences to this. Once there was a descendant of the queen that finally came over the mountain. They had expected her return for a long time, and this descendant of the queen, as soon as she came through the pass, saw this whole side of the mountain that had been completely deforested, and she wept. And as she came down in, she had expected to see this beautiful land full of wild animals and wild plants and streams that were crisp and clean, but she found instead a bleak landscape full of poverty alongside people that were wealthy and doing well. And she wept for that. And then instead of just standing up and shouting, "This is not what I expected to see," which she did do a little bit of that, she began to serve those people that were on the fringes. She began to try to find ways to feed the people that were hungry and to challenge the people that weren't. And this stirred up a little bit of excitement in the land. A great storm came, huge rains, thunder, lightning, mudslides came down the mountain because there weren't trees to hold the soil there. And it wiped out a whole little village and killed a whole bunch of people. And she wept and lamented and called the governor to account for all of that. A famine came, and the crops failed, and there wasn't any wild land to live off and support that. And so she went and she said, "Do you not hear the groaning? Can you not hear the creation crying out? And what is happening here? And the people that are dying?" And the governor at the time could not handle all of this challenge from her, so he had her taken up the mountain and killed. Time went on, and things continued to get worse. And then one day a drifter blew into town with a 10-year-old girl and a little boy, maybe 4 or 5. They were colorful people, dressed colorfully. They had colorful personalities. They seemed to almost kind of bounce around as they came into town. And the girl would not stop talking about a different kind of future. She would say, "Oh, it won't always be like this. It will get better. Things can be amazing and wonderful." Now, this sounded fanciful to most of the people, but to the people who were the most disadvantaged, it sounded good that things might get better someday. And so they began to follow this colorful trio and pay attention to them and try to find out what it was that they were talking about. A Sunday came along, and while everyone was hard at work, the three went and sat next to a dirty stream and had a picnic and laughed and told stories. This was puzzling to the people, but compelling at the same time. They wanted to know more about this, and so people began to follow them. Now, the governor had heard the story about the queen's descendant that had come over the mountain and couldn't put up with this. So he gathered the drifter in and he said, "Listen, this can't happen. You're stirring too much stuff. You need to leave." And the drifter said, "Well, I will leave on one condition." And the governor said, "What's that?" He said, "You just go up the mountain with me. We'll go over the peak a little bit, spend an afternoon there sitting with me, and then I'll go on my way." Now, this sounded a little bit risky to the governor, that maybe this drifter was going to take him someplace and kidnap him or whatever, but he thought the risk was worth it, because if the drifter did indeed go on his way, he would be gone and it would be pretty simply done. So they started up the mountain, and it was not quick traveling because that little boy was all over the place. He would stop and run off over here and see things that the governor didn't see, and then he'd find something to explore over there. So it took him a good long time to get up to the top of that mountain. But once they crossed over the peak, the governor had never been over there. It had been generations since anyone had crossed through that pass. He saw this great valley full of trees. He'd never seen anything like it. He was in awe at what he saw. And the drifter and the two little ones, they sat down and they invited him to just sit and listen. But his mind was going. He was like, how many houses could we build? What could we use all of this lumber for? Look at all of this resource that we did not know that was here. And he was about to say something, and the drifter just said, "Shh, just listen." Well, he wasn't good at listening, and so he was getting a little agitated, and he was just getting ready to get up when he heard a stick crack. And he turned, and like 10 feet away, he didn't know what an elk was, but there was an enormous elk looking right at him, with the antlers just reaching up into the sky. He'd never seen a wild animal. He'd never seen a beast like this. He was just in awe at this elk. And it just stared at him for a bit, and then it ran off. And now he could sit and listen. And as he listened, it took a while to settle a little bit, but he could hear the breeze blowing through the leaves of the trees. There was not a sound he had heard before. He all of a sudden heard birds. Without any trees in the land, they didn't have birds, and so he had to listen and wonder at this beautiful music he was hearing. He listened some more, and he thought he heard some water maybe somewhere off in the distance bubbling. And the more he listened, the more he had this sense of peace sort of settle over him. And he wanted to ask the drifter something. He was trying to formulate a question, and the drifter said, "Your land used to be like this. Not just like this, but lush and beautiful and wild all at the same time. When your people first came here, the queen listened to the land and learned about the land, and the land supported you and fed you and saved you. It was a gift that brought your people life. And as you settled in this place, the queen continued to listen and built a community that was full of contentment. When one of the queen's descendants came, she tried to bring that love back and to show you all how to listen again, but you ignored her and had her killed. The wisdom that you have been passing along is not the wisdom that you were given." He said, in the beginning, what it was that you were to work hard to serve one another, but not every day you were to take a day of rest to reflect on the blessings that you have been given and to build community together. The idea of listening to the land, you have not listened, and has been groaning and groaning for generations, crying out at the devastation that you have brought to the land. And the result has been death. Death from your mudslides, and death from your famines, and death from all of these things that happen because of what you have done in not listening and caring for this place. And lastly, you were supposed to care for yourselves so that you could care for others. That didn't mean to enrich yourselves. It meant to just be whole and to listen and to be at peace so that you could be well with one another. The governor was taking all of this in, wondering what to do with all of it, and the drifter said, "Listen, you all have treated this queen as if she was some high-off lord that was making you be in this place, but really, when she left, she meant for this to be yours. You were the heirs of it. You were not just the caretakers that were left in charge for a little while. This is your community. This is your place. You are this family that is here." And as the drifter finished, the governor said, "What do we do?" He said, "Well, you go back and you work hard to serve one another, but not on the seventh day. That day just rest and be together and listen to the land. It will come back. It will take its place again. And make sure that you take care of yourself and be whole and well so you can care for others. And the governor said, well, you have to come back with me. You have to come and explain this to everybody else. And the drifter said, no, I think you can do that now. You've heard it. You've got it. You'll be fine. And as the drifter and the little one started to go off, the guy looked at them and said, we've never learned your names. No one had ever thought to ask them their names. And the little girl pointed at the drifter and said, we call him the Spirit. And the drifter said, and her name is Hope. That's why she always talks about this different kind of future. And the little one, we call him Patience, because he makes us slow down and understand that sometimes we have to wait to get where we're going. With that, the governor went back over the mountain and he came back down to the people and he gathered them. It was the sixth day. He said, tomorrow we will not work. And they said, well, if we don't work, what are we going to do? He said, we will just be. And they found buried somewhere in the castle stories of the early days. And they began to share those stories together and to remember who they were. Somewhere they had forgotten who they were, and the land was waiting for them to rediscover who they were. And so they began then to rest again. And it turned out that if you gave the land some space, the wild came back rather quickly. He lived a long life, that governor, and as his time was about done, he gathered his closest aide to him and he said, listen, he said to her, there are some bits of wisdom you have to remember. First, and you got it all right this time, he said, work hard to serve and care for one another like we've been doing. Don't forget that bit. That's important. Second, he said, listen to this land. We've seen it coming back and growing again. And you see the things coming up in the mountains and in the villages that burned out. Listen to that and pay attention to it because this land will care for us if we care well for it. Third, he said, take care of yourself. You have to be at peace and whole and well if you're going to serve each other. He said, but I have to add a fourth one because along the way the other three got messed up. He goes, the fourth one, remember that all of this is a gift. It was a gift to us from the beginning. The Queen created this place for us. It was a gift of a community. It was a gift of a land. We are a gift to one another. None of this we did on our own. All of it is a gift. If we can just remember that it's a gift, then we won't mess up the part about working together and working hard and resting, and we will listen to the land. We'll do all of that because it is a gift to us to give us life. And just as he said those words, a bird landed in the windowsill and began to sing a new song. Amen.